Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Ask Me Anything for September. This is non-traditional routes for medical laboratory scientists. I'm Heather Harrington. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. If you have any questions to ask, please leave them in the chat and I will relay them to our panelists. For now, I'm just going to have our panelists go and do some brief introductions of themselves. Let's see, first in my window, Sophia, do you want to go first?
Sure, since I took notes of what I'm supposed to say, since I can't remember anything anymore nowadays. Hi, my name is Sophia Chandrasekar. I am the artist and creator of Warbler Work Studio. So I run the I draw the comics, write the comics, and create everything for the shop. Package a shop, run the shop, and the only thing I don't do is drive directly to the post office. My husband does that. Before I really sort of focused more on the shop, I actually started the comics and everything back in January of 2020. I was still a full-time med tech. I was actually the lead senior weekend supervisor on day shift, as well as the gas chromatography lead tech. And then I was that up until May of this year, where I stepped down, and I'm still a bench tech. I am a per diem, so I work every Thursday and Friday at the lab. And the rest of the days, I either take an art class or I am spending creating more stuff for the shop or creating comics and packing orders.
Cool. All right, Vera, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Vera. I'm the infection preventionist lead at University of Chicago Medicine right now. I've been in infection control for about 6 years now. Prior to that, I was a med tech in the clinical microbiology lab at UCM for about 6 years also. I graduated from Rush University with a master's in medical laboratory science. I have a bachelor's from University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana in molecular and cellular biology. I am still a certified med tech because it's required of me to be infection preventionist, and also I like to just maintain my skills, right? And I'm also certified in infection control. I'm really excited to be here today, so thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Let's see, Samantha?
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha Salm. I'm a senior field application specialist with Roche Diagnostics. I've been in this role for about 6 years with Roche. Before that, I was a lead medical laboratory scientist at a clinic here in Wisconsin, and that's where I currently live. I graduated with a bachelor's in medical technology from University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and excited to be here today and provide my point of view on a career in industry.
Let's see, there are a lot of people here. Stephanie.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Heather, for having me. My name is Stephanie Noblit, and I'm a legislative attorney currently working within the field of drug policy. Before I went to law school, I was working as a medical laboratory scientist in a clinical toxicology lab at the Hospital of University of Pennsylvania in Philly. I worked there for about 2.5 years before I realized that I was really interested in government affairs and legislative issues. And I realized that passion through ASCLS, specifically being on their government affairs committee. So now I work for a government-funded nonprofit, and we do work within the area of public health, substance use disorder, and criminal justice.
Very cool. I'm looking through, I see Andrea, one of our other panelists. Looks like she might be muted still. And then is Dr. Kanakis here? He is our sixth.
Dr. Kanakis might be not coming. I'm not sure exactly. I'm checking in with him. He just came down with COVID, so I'm checking in with him.
Okay, thank you, Tula. Andrea, are you able to put your video on, or?
Yeah,
all right.
I think so.
There you are.
Hey, so I'm Andrea. I graduated from Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi with a bachelor's in biochemistry. Then I went back and got my post-bachelor certification in clinical laboratory science. Then a couple of years later, I went back and got my master's in business administration. So I was at that school for quite a while. But I spent most of my med tech time being either in blood bank or microbiology. I moved around a lot. So I was in Texas, and then I met my husband, and he was doing his residency program. So I ended up moving up to New Jersey and then to Pittsburgh, where I met Heather. And now I'm a quality and regulatory associate for Prime Path MedTech, which is a startup company. So we just kind of help like other companies, or if people are interested in starting something and getting it FDA approved, we kind of help with all the paperwork, making sure that they're qualified and able to do that and push their product out into the market. So that's it, but thank you for having me.
Very cool. So just to reiterate to all of our participants here, if you would like to ask questions, you can feel free to put yourself on video or definitely drop them in the chat. And otherwise, I will just kind of go off questions that I have come up with and other questions that I have seen in various forums. So we'll start off, I think, with one that might be applicable to a lot of people. For those of you who worked in the lab, what was kind of the moment when you thought, you know, I want to pursue a different path? And kind of how long did it take between you originally having that thought and you actually going on to pursue that other passion? Let's see, Sophia, I know that you definitely worked on the bench, so.
Yeah, so I actually, I remember a conversation I had with my supervisor couple years ago when she did my performance appraisal, and I said, I can guarantee you 3 more years here. I cannot guarantee however many more years after, because I want to go back to art school eventually. So when I stepped into my weekend supervisor role, it's still like it was like a half bench tech role, half supervisory role. Like, you know, you're the one in charge on the weekends, but during the weekdays, you're still a bench tech, right? Like I think I came up with that idea probably around like 2018, saying that I wanted to do something. There was something I wanted to do, because I think that was right after I had just finished up the first lab coloring book. And then I was about to start the second lab coloring book for NCS CLS. So I was like, you know, I really like doing these scientific and more educational illustrations. Like, I really enjoy that because it's a fun challenge. It's very constricting. And I feel like when you have more rules, it makes you have to think more creatively, right? Instead of just, here's an open world, do whatever you want. So I think I figured that out in 2018. 2020, like beginning of 2020, I was just kind of tired, and I was like, you know what, I have all this stuff on backlog. If I don't do something now, it's never going to happen. So then I started in January, and then COVID happened. And then I think a little bit of, not so much burnout, but more like I had more opportunities that came later at the end of 2020 and 2021 that sort of opened my eyes of, hey, these are things that you could actually do. And like, I had more class opportunities, and there are a lot more like schools that were considered for concept design that only held classes in person in California, but now because of COVID, everything was online. So, and they're staying online because now they went from having 20 classes to 70 classes because they can do online. So now I feel like there's more opportunities for me, at least personally, to do more art classes and to gain skill without having to move to California, right? So I think, yeah, so 2018, and then I think I told my supervisor the end of 2021 that by May of 2022, I would have to step down. So several years there, but I got there.
Samantha, kind of what was your route going into industry?
Yeah, so when I was working in the lab, I was working with Roche Diagnostics equipment. So I got to go to their campus in Indianapolis for training, for like their customer training. And I think that was definitely when I first realized that I really wanted to work for the company, because I just loved the company culture, and I was really impressed by the campus and everybody who worked there. And then once I started networking more with the people that were coming into my lab, so like the field engineer specialists and the field application specialists that were coming into our lab to work on the equipment, started talking with them more. And one thing for me was the first time I applied for a role within Roche, I actually didn't get the job. So it actually took like another year of like kind of working on my skills, learning more of the technical side as well. And then another opportunity came up that I applied for, and that's when I started in the company. So I feel like it took a couple years, but a lot of it was trying to meet as many people as I could and ask them questions about what the job would be like, things like that, to try to see if it would be a good fit for me. So
I guess, Stephanie, you probably took the most drastic leap. What happened?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but like I had mentioned, I had kind of discovered this world of policy and government affairs through being a part of the government affairs committee on the national ASCLS level. And I realized there's all this stuff kind of going on in the background that I didn't realize what was happening, but it was affecting me and my coworkers and ultimately our patients every day. And as I was learning about these policies, I would think and say, a lot of these really don't make any sense. Like, have these people ever stepped in a lab before? Like, do they know that there's people working here and what we're capable and not capable of doing? I thought maybe it would be better if there was people that had actual lab experience, making these laws or, informing policy. And so I kind of decided really on a whim that, if I was going to do this, let me do it all the way and get a JD. And so I had actually just finished taking the GEDs because I thought I wanted to go get a PhD in microbiology or virology or something. And a month after I took, the GREs, I ordered an LSAT study book and, decided, okay, I'm going to do this, and figured, all right, I need to just do it or I'm going to end up changing my mind. And yeah, that's kind of what happened. I kind of got this idea and just ran with it without really realizing what I was getting myself into. But yeah, I'm really happy with the decision that I made, although it was a really scary decision. I definitely know that being able to have a unique background where I'm able to use my science and lab knowledge to kind of inform the legal and policy work that I'm doing. I'm able to kind of provide a unique perspective that really isn't there, or a lot of people aren't able to provide.
I guess the person I'm most familiar with is Andrea. I know she was just my coworker not a very long time ago, and I'm curious what made you kind of make the leap into, I guess, sort of industry-ish, startup world?
Yeah, so I just wanted a better work-life balance. Like when I was working as a lab tech, especially moving around so much, I had worked every Christmas for the past 5 years. And now that I'm pregnant and stuff, I want to spend more time with my family. So definitely being able to work from home makes a huge difference because we're off every vacation, every holiday. So it worked out really well. And then also one of the jobs I had, it was just very toxic, not when I worked with Heather, but previous to that. So it left a really bad taste in my mouth. So I just wanted something different, wanted to see what else was out there, something I could also put my MBA towards. So it worked out really well. The company I'm with is awesome. They don't have anybody that's toxic. If they do, they get rid of them immediately. And they're always looking out for your best interest, always asking if you need any help with anything, how your week has been. It feels like a nice family. And I've had that experience in the lab, but I feel like I've also had really bad experiences as well. So yeah, it's just a nice change.
And Vera, I'm curious if you kind of knew starting out that you wanted to go into infection prevention, or if that was sort of something you kind of slid into.
Not really, I'll be honest. At the time of my applying for the new role, I had been a med tech for about 6 years, and I didn't really have a clear idea what was driving me to apply. But looking back now, I can say that three biggest driving forces were money, work-life balance, and boredom, right? And please don't misconstrue, that statement. We are all too aware of how grossly underpaid and undervalued we are in the healthcare industry, like many other roles too. But infection control, I found out, as I did some research into it, offers a work-life balance that we can never have as med techs. There's more flexibility with our schedules compared to other healthcare workers. And as for boredom, I love being a med tech. And even without this IC opportunity, I could see myself being a med tech forever and being satisfied with it based on my own personality. But it doesn't mean that I wouldn't have been bored. IC provides a lot of professional challenges that I find mentally stimulating. And the field uses a lot of my strong skills of investigation, project management, et cetera. Within the first 2 to 3 years of my time as a med tech, it was clear that I would be taking on more responsibilities on a track for more, with more leadership potential. However, in my opinion, opportunities for real challenges and professional growth are kind of limited and can take a long time in the traditional clinical lab at a hospital. So that's kind of why I went that route. But, don't get me wrong. I would love to not work for a living. I can travel the world, private jet, wine and cheese. I'm a total slacker, but I have to eat, right? We all have to eat. And I wasn't born rich, don't understand cryptocurrency. So infection control, it is. And I love what I do. I'm lucky to be able to do what I do.
My laboratory coworkers were asking someone's ideal job, and my response was philanthropist. But yeah, I don't think that's in the cards for me. So working it is. I have a question in the chat about if any of you have any advice on how to plan transitioning from being a bench tech into a career like yours, and to kind of hopefully ensure success in that transition process.
I'm happy to take a first stab at it. Shadow, talk to everybody that you know, and get connected to anyone who has that position or in that field, and ask for an opportunity to spend the day with them. Here in infection control, at our program here, we offer people the opportunity to shadow us, because sometimes, this isn't what you think it is. We don't really know it until you actually step into those shoes. So I say you research, you Google, and you get connected to as many, just even cold emailing people is totally okay. Email anyone you know in that industry and just ask, hey, can I stop by and shadow you? Here in infection control, we're always looking to help support and grow future infection preventionists, because it's a field that is very much needed, just like med techs, of course, too. But just reach out to those people and ask for a chance to just see how they do in their daily lives, what their job.
I'm going to do a quick interrupt, and then I definitely want to go back to that question, but I see that Dr. Kanakis, I think, joined. I received a message that all right, there we go. Would you mind doing a brief introduction of yourself, just letting us know kind of what you do now and where you originally entered into the laboratory field? And thank you for coming. I hope you feel better.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm sorry if I got mixed up with the times and the links. I'm also getting over, as you said, the tail end of a COVID case of my own. So sorry for my voice being horrible to listen to. You have to put up with me very minimally, I promise. But I went to undergrad at Loyola. I went to grad school at Roche, where I got a master's in medical laboratory science. And actually worked for almost 10 years in various hospitals in the city of Chicago as a generalist and blood bank laboratory scientist. After that time, I transferred and pivoted and went to medical school, the entire time knowing that I wanted to do pathology and laboratory medicine because of my foundation in the lab. Now I'm a third year senior resident at Loyola Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. I teach MLS classes, I do medical laboratory pathology work, and I am the 2024 Hematopathology Fellow at Loyola, and hopefully the 2025 Transfusion Medicine Fellow at Loyola. Yeah, that was as brief as I could make it.
That's exciting. So we're asking, in the middle of answering a question about if any of you have advice on how to plan the type of transition going from the lab bench into a new direction to hopefully be successful at it, kind of what the process you took was.
For me, the transition was sort of a long plan in process anyway. I had wanted to go to med school in college before I even understood what medical laboratory science was. And once I kind of immersed myself in the MLS world, I couldn't see myself doing anything else. So for me, it was sort of a step back to reconcile my new dream and my old dream. And that's how I ended up in the specialty I'm in. But I think for every person individually, you need to think about what would make you happy as far as your professional, goals. Like, where do you see yourself in that corner office? Do the exercise of what your ideal CV would look like, and what is the thing that you do every day? And that's kind of what was my compass as I tried to kind of reconcile those two. Specific examples for transitioning to medical school are a whole host of another conversation.
I wanted to piggyback off of Vera from earlier, especially since I know there's not really many or maybe like 2 or 3 other lab people that I know of who've transitioned a little bit and done art, or they do art on the side. There's not many people out there who do that. And if you're trying to look into something that maybe not many people are doing, definitely do a lot of research, do a lot of planning, sort of like Dr. Kanakis said, start out with what your dream goal is, and then work backwards and see where you need, what kind of steps you need to take to even get to that and what that would look like. And then research different pathways from there for sure. And that makes things a little easier. I'm not sure how to make it any easier than that.
That was great.
I'll chime in on this one too. Absolutely agree with Vera about networking and trying to meet as many people as you can in a role that you're interested in, and talk to them about it. And cold emailing them or messaging them on LinkedIn, that's normal. So I know it feels awkward at first, but just go for it. And the person that you're trying to reach out to likely that's totally common for them. I also wanted to say, I know that a lot of the folks on this panel have advanced degrees, but I did want to say for industry, at least the colleagues that I work with, a lot of times an advanced degree is actually not necessary. So I have my bachelor's degree, but I don't have a master's or anything above my bachelor's. And I work with a lot of people that also have MLT certifications. So they have an associate's degree. So I also just wanted to encourage people out there to it's absolutely great to pursue an advanced degree, but look at what you want to do and see if it's really necessary before going through all of that work.
And I have another question in the chat. I'm not sure that I fully understand the follow-up, but with these non-traditional MLS roles, what type of roles are available for those with an MPH? And is there a better or worse public health concentration for transitioning MLS?
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say I might be able to offer some insight. So there's a lot of things you can do with an MPH degree. One of those things is you can, instead of taking it more of a clinical route, you can take it more of a policy route. So I have a JD, but I applied, I knew I didn't want to work in a courtroom or be a contract attorney. I wanted to work in policy. But a lot of the jobs, when I was looking for a job that I was applying to, are considered JD advantage, meaning that, it's nice if you have the JD, but you don't necessarily have to. And because I wanted to work in health policy, a lot of those jobs were really also open to people with public health degrees or masters of public policy degrees. So those are things that you can look into if you're interested in sort of a health policy job. With an MPH, those are always options. There's tons of nonprofits, even for-profits, and that are looking for kind of policy-focused MPHs. So that's one option for that kind of degree.
And if you wanted to do a little bit more clinical, hospital-based field as well. You know, in infection control, we are made up of nurses, med techs, and those with MPHs. It just kind of depends on what you decide to concentrate on. But we, you know, UC especially, and I see programs across countries are staffed a little bit differently. But, you know, on our team here in Chicago, we really benefit from having a diverse, balanced team of med techs, you know, nurses and MPHs. So that's always an avenue for you to explore as well.
And I have a question for Dr. Kanakis, asking if you could expand on how you completed your pre-med requirements while working full-time as an MLS.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you a double answer because I have a little bit to add to the public health piece there. But I've had a bunch of opportunities to work in public health in my sort of medical training and lab time. I did go to medical school overseas, so I was like very intimately involved with the Ministry of Health there and worked with Zika prevention efforts and sort of doing sort of public health outreach and advocacy and education. But also I was one of the team leaders for validating, verifying, and establishing IgAG and IgM laboratory testing for Zika serology. So I was living, you know, in both of these worlds doing the same public health work. And I just want to remind everybody that all of public health data is laboratory data. It's the same data. And testing data is very important in making policy decisions, like Stephanie said, or making healthcare decisions, like I'm telling you, or infection control decisions, like Vera just said. And I had other experiences when I was in New York, in Manhattan, working with the public health laboratory in the beginning of COVID. This is ironically the only time I've ever had COVID in this entire history of this whole thing. So I'm really frustrated about that. But being a part of public health laboratories is a very fulfilling role as a medical laboratory scientist, especially on the front lines of when these things happen. So there are many opportunities available for those with or without Master's of Public Health or other degrees that were just mentioned. For my experience in the transition that I said for medical school, I knew somebody was going to hang that like low hanging fruit. Go for it right there. So pre-med requirements are daunting and yucky and terrible. And I said I had wanted to go to medical school in college. So I was basically 90% there just from going to college. I got a biology degree, so I had satisfied most of that stuff, but there were still some things I needed to do. I think from my personal experience going to the graduate MLS program at Roche in Chicago, kind of knocked all the rest of the pre-requirements for biostatistics and stuff out of the way. But I, like many people in the MLS world, when I was working full-time, I was working two jobs. I was going to an AM day shift job, and I was taking a break and driving to my night shift or swing shift job and sleeping and repeating times of 365. For whatever reason, for the money or for the opportunities, you know, we all end up doing that sometimes in this sort of workforce environment, but it can be really hard. And I remember leveraging some online opportunities. I remember leveraging some, you know, off hours opportunities and trying to coalesce as much as I could. Don't be afraid to employ community colleges into your fold for doing prerequisites. None of those prerequisites will ever get looked at again once you get to the next step of whatever you're trying to do. So if you can just satisfy those requirements, however that fit into your virtual or in-person schedule, that would be just fine.
Sorry to also jump on to this too, because I'm still on the bench and I have quite a few coworkers who actually are also taking classes to do their prerequisites and such. Most of the time, so I work at a university hospital, so they'll use, I think like reimbursement up to, I think like 3 to 6 credit hours maybe per semester. And they'll use the opportunity to take online classes either at the university or at another university within the system to get those prereqs knocked out bit by bit, and then, you know, work out with their supervisor, hey, I have an exam on this date. I need to go, you know, have a project, I need to leave early. Like they'll work something out, and usually they'll take their classes that way.
Are there parts of being in the lab that any of you miss? Do you ever think, Sophia, you're still in the lab, but for those of you, even for you, like, are there parts that you like enough that you just can't quite quit it?
I miss the people. I'm only there now on Thursdays and Fridays, right? So I get to feel everyone's joy of, oh my gosh, it's almost the weekend. And like, that, yeah, except for, of course, people who are about to work the weekend, which, that was my life for 3 years. So I was like, yeah, Friday's my Tuesday, whatever. But I really miss the people. Like I like being home and taking care of my own stuff. I'm very introverted. I like being able to work on my own shop. But then when I'm at work, I'm like, yeah, people, this is great. And then when, after Friday, I'm like, oh yeah, everyone's gone and I'll see them in 5 days versus like, I'll see them next week. Like if something exciting happens, I have to text them or I can't meet up with them as quickly or as much as I used to. So I personally just miss the people and the surprises you get to see every day.
I'll jump in after that because the people are definitely what I miss the most. And I'm not going to say that I'm actually removed from the lab 100%. I'm still there by proxy. As like pathology residents, we go in there, we take care of troubleshooting problems and kind of escalate things as they go. I'm path review now. When things go to path review, that's me. So when that kind of spurious, weird CBC with maybe blasts comes our way, I am like the first one to line up to go to the lab. I'm the first one to connect with those people again, chat about how QC is going, kind of meet with them. And I like when I get old and gray and I'm going to be one of those old timey like pathology doctors, everyone's going to hate me. And old and gray for me probably means like an hour after this phone call. I don't know. But I'm going to be that guy that knows like how the QC stuff goes, that knows all the blood bank secret lingo. That doesn't mean that the cross match isn't going to be ready in less than 15 minutes, etc. And I'll be able to speak that language. So I keep it sharp and I kind of engage with them as much as I can because I still keep up my MLS license, like just in case, I don't know, some kind of global world-ending medicine-ending pandemic, and I'll be right back in the lab.
I feel like my reason, what I miss about the lab isn't as pure as Sophia said, Dr. Kanakis is. I miss clocking in and out. That's the honest answer. I miss feeling, when you're in as a micro med tech at least, right? I go in and I get my urine cultures done, I get that PCR cycle running, and by 3 o'clock, if I've completed all those things and report all the results, I feel really good, really accomplished and satisfied. But as an infection preventionist, the work never ends. And when you don't, even though we're done at 5 o'clock, there's a lot of things that we think about at home. And in some ways, there's something hanging over your head sometimes, right? And of course, this is also possibly a personal problem too, where I had trouble establishing my own work boundaries, perhaps. But as an IP, it's kind of impossible to finish your work all in one day. Projects are ongoing, fires come up during the day that need putting out, which means that whatever you had prioritized as your to-do is now, your second most important, or maybe deferred to the next week or next month, right? That was one of the hardest adjustments that I had to make as a medtech to an IP. At the end of the day, I just don't feel as accomplished, but I'm working on that, reminding myself from a bigger picture of like the projects that you accomplished instead. And also as an IP, I don't know how other programs are going to do differently, but our program, we have our own lab. So, and because, we have my techs on our team as well. So I still get to, streak plates, collect samples and analyze them also. Not every day, but we get to do that as part of our investigation. So it's nice to have that as well.
For me, I kind of miss like the instant gratification of knowing that you're making a difference. Like when I was in the lab, if I, ran 50 drug screens that day, I had a direct impact on 50 people. And now working in policy, things move so slow that it seems like you're taking months to potentially help somebody. Like it's hard. Like I do feel like I'm making a difference in the work that I'm doing now, but it's hard to kind of move at that snail's pace when you're used to, constantly being a presence in the patient's life and their kind of well-being.
Samantha, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, one of the things I can relate to some of the, or kind of repeat what some of the people have said so far, but I still am in laboratories because I go into our customer laboratories, and I definitely try to partner with the teams there, the medical lab scientists there, the supervisors and leadership there. But I do miss doing diffs. Like, I work on chemistry analyzers now, and if you would have asked me when I was in school if I would ever work in chemistry, and that would be my main choice, I would have said, oh, heck no. So things change, but I do miss doing like diffs. I miss, a little bit of micro that I got to do, and like blood bank. So I miss some of those parts of the lab that are not part of my job anymore. So yeah, different things for everybody.
I got a DM question. Is there any of you that had to take a pay cut in the beginning after you left the bench to advance to your new role? And if so, how did you feel about that or deal with it?
I went from a full-time position to a part-time position. My paychecks are piddly. They look sad. I am more than happy to stay late if stuff needs to get done. I depending on whatever day on a weekend, I will come in for an extra day because, the working 4 10s going down to 2 8-hour shifts a week that's a big pay cut. I'm lucky enough that my husband is an engineer, so that kind of works out, but also because we've also saved up a lot for me to even be able to get to this transition point. Again, like with that whole, if you plan everything out, you can kind of like prepare. We had sort of mentally prepared for, okay, like mentally and financially prepared for, okay, I'm going to be going to school. I'm going to be like out of the workforce essentially for say like 3-4 years. So prepare financially for that. The shop is pretty much self-sufficient at this point, like relatively self-sufficient. I may have to like inject some stimulus into it every once in a while, but it can take care of itself. So I don't have to worry about that too much. As long as I budget it out, my husband acts as a CFO and just like make sure I don't order too many supplies or too many things at once. So yeah, the pay cut hurt a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Just looking at the paychecks felt really weird.
I'm gonna jump in with the pay cut thing because I think that when you say that I went to medical school and I'm now a resident physician, people think, oh, you're on the right track, you're fine, you'll be okay. But I was making more as a tech on the bench than I am after med school, which is fine. I had originally started doing night and PM shifts, so I was just loving that differential, right, for every hour. And then I switched to day shift as the seniority naturally progresses. And then I had switched to part-time roles and then switched down and then switched to a management type role and then left work for medical school. So I was paying and then going into more debt. And then I got residency, and it's a standard sort of like 60-70 average a year, where you luckily in pathology don't work as much, but the expected don't go over the magic number is 80-hour a week timetable. It's a lot, it's too much. And the pay cut is temporary, and then temporary is sort of going on 6 years now, but it'll be okay one day. But you have to plan, like Sophia said, long-term, and it's not always about the paycheck, even though it is about paycheck. But it's about your like long-term happiness. And if you feel fulfilled, and if you feel like this is the right spot for you, then it'll all be worth it.
Anyone else? Like, I know obviously, Stephanie, you take a pay cut, going to law school, but that was, again, a temporary thing that you just kind of have to plan for.
Yeah, I mean, anything when you're making like a big decision, whether it's law school, med school, art school, like if you're going to have to take time off of work, that's going to be a huge pay cut. But like Sophia and Dr. Kanakis said, like you just have to kind of plan ahead and figure it out. Yeah. And, keep remembering that it'll be worth it in the end, hopefully.
End goal, end goal. I have another question about, obviously, when you're switching from career to career or just industry to industry, mentorship helps us know like what's available out there. Other than going to conferences, how do you network and obtain mentors? And what advice do you have as far as maintaining that relationship to get the most out of it? I think especially this is hard for those of us who are more introverted. So if anyone could address that, that would be great.
Go ahead, Vera. Yeah.
I think I could stab, but this may not be a very I don't know if this is the right answer. Of course, there are no right answers. I'm super introverted. I don't go to many conferences. I take my C online. But I would say, how do you get those connections made? Say hi to everyone you see at work. That's, I mean, if you're in a hospital like me, I remember as a med tech, and even now, everyone down the hallway, I would say hello to them. Just, whether it be the doctor, the nurse, the janitor, or the linens person, right? Or the president of the hospital. You just say hello, which is a nice thing to do. But in those, daily interactions, you do end up developing relationships with these people because you see them down the hallway over time. And that's one way for you to meet other people in other roles and get connected, and who knows where that can lead after that.
One way that I've been able to meet a lot of people is through ASCLS. So, and some of that is through conferences, but some of it is not necessarily. Some of it can be like working on a committee, which is more like not necessarily one-on-one, but like smaller groups. And even just coming on stuff like this, like you could like see someone's name that they're talking about this, and maybe you just send them an email afterwards or whatever it is. But I've also had some mentors that aren't necessarily like in the exact path that I want to do. They're just like a person that I feel like I can bounce ideas off of, or they might be in the industry. So it's more than just like talking to my sister about it. They understand a little bit more about the ins and outs of the laboratory or the industry. So I would just say, keep your mind open to different types of mentors that you might have, and kind of build a good reputation for yourself, or kind of get your name out there in a way that, like someone sees your name and they're like, oh yeah, that person was on such and such committee with me a few years ago and they were super open-minded and kind. And then they'll probably be like, at least I know that name, and be comfortable talking to you or whatever it is. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
I'll add my 2 cents to that. There are tons of different ways to network and get mentorship and stuff. And I think there are a few important things to remember. The first of which is, when you're looking for a mentor personally, you need somebody who is doing what you want to do, or at least something as close to what you want to do as possible, because they can give you the most appropriate and direct advice. But aside from just mentoring, because that just involves guiding, advice, and experience sharing and things like that, you want somebody who is a sponsor for you also. Giving you advice is great, but giving you an opportunity is even better. Offering you to contribute to a paper, or offering you to contribute to a committee, like Samantha said, or offering you opportunities to help your career and your own experience grow. That's sponsorship. So you want to find somebody that is both a mentor and a potential sponsor. Heather, you said most of us are introverts because just by nature and virtue, but I have always been the most extroverted extrovert I can possibly define. My battery recharges, even though I have a global pandemic virus, by doing things in public with groups of people. So it's different for everyone, and there are different modalities and vehicles to connect with people, whether you're an extrovert or introvert. Conferences are great, obviously, that's the very obvious answer, but there's a whole host of connectivity on social media. The pathology, laboratory medicine, and medical lab science, sort of lab Twitter world is explosive and dynamic, and everybody is connected and talking about stuff, and you can do that from the comfort of your own home and your pajamas. But if you want to meet people, you can join committees and do things. I'm on like 6 of them, just in blood bank and patient champions and education and teaching and all kinds of stuff. And you just Find a place where you can contribute, and that makes you worth, something to the next person who might need your advice. Before you even realize it, if you're successful in taking small incremental steps in your career goals, you will find that people will be forming a line behind you, trying to see what your success is, your secret is, and you don't even have a secret yet. And it's just the cycle of mentorship and sponsorship that kind of what I thought was a, lock and key secret is sort of a dynamic and organic process.
I think it's funny that you say that you're more of an extrovert, because I saw a joke one time about how do you tell the extrovert at a pathology conference? They're the person looking at the other person's shoes when they're talking together. So extroversion in pathology and in the lab, I think, are not very common.
Accurate.
So kudos. Oh, I love this question. Do you feel like you are in your forever role? Do you see yourself doing anything different from what you're doing now? Is this it for you?
Well, I said I'm going to retire in like an hour after this, so I don't know.
How about everyone else? Is this it? Or do you think you're going to move on?
Well, my boss is on this Zoom, so I don't know how to respond to this. She's great. But the answer
Vera's never going to move on. She's very happy.
I don't think there's such thing as a forever role. I feel like we often change, and we're constantly changing. The world's constantly changing. I think it's up to you to figure out what drives you and what you want to do. And as I said, make those plans, right? But sometimes also be aware that when you get to that point, maybe plans change, and then that's totally okay. All right. I'm almost 40. Yeah, I know. Ready to retire also after Kanakis as well, me. And I still don't know if IC is my thing. There are very hard days, years, given that there's a pandemic. But at the end of the day, I love what I do, and I love the lifestyle it affords me and the work-life balance, right? And how my work impacts a lot of people for good. But maybe in 20 years, I'll feel differently. And if that's the case, that's okay. I'll make the adjustments accordingly. It's okay to change, it's okay to grow.
I'm curious, Samantha, do you envision yourself sticking in industry? I know you just had a bit of a job shakeup.
Yeah, I did. I am recently in a job transition, actually. So I've been in the field application role for about 6 years, and I'm moving over to an account executive role. Currently. So I'm kind of doing two things right now, but so I'm moving more into the business side of things, which is going to be interesting. One thing that drove me to that was I feel that a lot of my experience from being a medical lab scientist and from being on the technical side will help me be a good account executive and help people make decisions on that level. So I'm kind of excited for it because it wasn't really something I'd been planning to do. Like, it wasn't like my long-term plan or anything. But the more I learned about it, the more I realized that learning more of the business side of things along with my technical knowledge, kind of want to combiне it to basically have more of a well-rounded view of our industry and our business. So yeah, I definitely don't think I'm in my forever role, even with this change. I've also noticed that from moving outside of my role in the lab, I feel like there's kind of a whole new world out there, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. So you're not necessarily you're not planning to be in that role for the rest of your career. There's a lot of different branches, lateral moves, different things you can do. So yeah.
I don't think I can stress enough, don't be afraid to explore, like what everyone has been saying out here. Don't be afraid to go out there and explore and make those connections. The best thing about being a med tech is that you can always come back to where you started, right? I know a dentist who became a med tech, who became an IP, and then a few years later realized she just wanted to be a med tech. And so she came back to being med tech and has never looked back. So it's crazy where this life takes you. Just don't be afraid and just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Vera. And I think most of us, or if not all of us on the panel, have said we all keep our active certification So, if I wake up tomorrow and I'm like, you know what, I'm done with this. I know I could go back into the lab if I want to. But to Tula's question, which I think was a great question, I think
for those who didn't see it, it's about imposter syndrome. It is real.
Yeah. But to Tula's question about the forever role, I think I have gotten to a place where I have developed like the tools to do what I want, but know that like I'm not stuck there. Like I can broaden my horizon or change kind of the focus of my goals at any time. So I wouldn't say the position that I'm in now is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, but definitely knowing that I'm kind of building on that.
Stephanie, I thought that you had seen her next question. So there's a follow-up question after that, actually from a different person, asking about imposter syndrome. And I think that that's a very real thing when you're switching into a new field.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
How did you battle it? I know I would. If you did, kind of how did you break through that and get more comfortable in your new role?
I mean, we broke through it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I'm still dealing with it, maybe not as bad as before. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard, especially because I, came into this with no background in the legal field, and I had my degree, but unlike kind of like a science degree where it teaches you how to be a scientist, like law is just like, all right, you're going to figure it out like once you actually get your job, because it's so like theoretical. But yeah, I think a lot of kind of finding the confidence was kind of remembering that in this unique position that I'm in, where I have this science background that very few people have, that also have a JD. Anybody theoretically can go and get a law degree, but there's few people out there that are going to have that law degree that are also going to be able to back it up with science. And so in kind of pulling from, the lab background and my confidence in knowing that I knew things that people didn't understand, and was able to kind of shift between like the jargon between like the medical and the legal, just kind of finding the strength in that was kind of what helped me further get over it. Not completely get over it, but further get over it.
I definitely feel like I have to chime in on this, because I still experience imposter syndrome all the time, because I have a degree in biology, I have a degree in anthropology, and I have a degree in CLS. I have no degree in art. I have no degree in design. I had a minor in theatrical design. I am self-taught. And then I decided I was going to take classes online with concept design artists who do art for movies and video games. And I'm over here with cartoons, and they have beautiful rendered like paintings out of a Star Wars book. Like, what the heck? But what I found was, like Stephanie said, you take your own experiences, and like I take my science background and apply it to my art, and it's very different than other people's who don't have that experience, right? So like one of the reasons why I started making my stuff is because I was tired of seeing the same 4 pictures of a microscope on all like the products out there on Etsy, because everyone just uses the same 4 because no one knows much about the lab, right? So I was like, well, I can take what I know, which is I am sitting next to a microscope. I can draw that real quick and then, further render it and then turn that into a cartoon and then use that, like you just have to remind yourself, your experiences put you in a unique position. Your viewpoints and your everything else just change it like ever so slightly, right? Like there's not going to be another, I mean, there might be, but there's not another laboratory scientist, artist who's gone through gas chromatography and things like that, right? And who reads them like I do, who might make art out of gas chromatography like I do. Like it's very different, and you just remind yourself that you have to be confident. You have to be confident in who you are and where you stand with your experiences.
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit on this one too. When I first started in my role with Roche, and I was talking with lab directors and lab managers, and I was in my 20s, and I was always so like in my head about being this young person talking to these people who've been in the lab for longer than I've been alive or whatever. But what I found is, yeah, there'll be a few people that might make a comment or something, but for the most part, nobody cares, and they'll listen to you if you know what you're talking about, and if you need help and you do need someone to step in and help explain something to somebody, you can get support from your team, hopefully, with that. But imposter syndrome definitely still is alive and well. But I think that, I guess, knowing that everybody has it, and also knowing that maybe there's a younger version of you that's trying to do what you're doing, and if you can show up and be that person to show them like, hey, you can do this too, that's an awesome thing to keep in the back of your mind, to kind of give you that little bit of confidence, to say, like, you know, bringing that younger person into the conversation or whatever it might be, you know, to show that can be done well, and try to battle a little bit of that imposter syndrome.
I want to add a thought that I think I think maybe connects Stephanie and me in our law school, med school experience, in the fact that I think those two trainings, and maybe other people here too, are imbued with meta imposter syndrome, where everyone around you has imposter syndrome and you have imposter syndrome, but everybody else seems so confident, so your imposter syndrome must be worse. And it just perpetuates forever and ever. And I have a couple examples that I can think of in the transitions that I've had in my career, where, I mean, it throws you back into a horribly uncomfortable position, but that's where you grow. And I think we should really embrace that feeling. So I remember I was first class in medical school. This is one of my favorite stories. I won't tell you all of them, but I had worked for 10 years as an MLS. I had done molecular, I had done flow gating, I had done capillary electrophoresis. I was doing all the complexity that I could handle. My first class was some kind of molecular biology thing. And one of the final exams had some kind of, like, it was about lab tests, PCR, real-time stuff. And I was like, I got this. This is great. My first med school test is a med tech test. Fine. I failed, like totally failed, like really hard, like badly. And that set me on a different, you know, kind of reset and regroup. And that has happened cyclically when I was like, I can totally handle this cap inspection. I cannot handle this cap inspection. I can totally diagnose what's on the slide. I cannot diagnose what's on the slide. And it just happens, and it's a good thing. But if you have made it so far to feel that feeling and surrounded by people who also feel that feeling, you're just growing and learning, and it's okay.
Vera, how about you over in infection?
Oh, this is like therapy now. I totally have imposter syndrome. I mean, I have it right now. I'm surrounded by these incredibly talented and successful professionals on this panel, and it's like a total slacker. But you know what? It's one of those things where I remind myself, you know, that I am a med tech. We are on med tech, you know, and you've learned a lot in being the lab. I don't mean like running tests and identifying organisms. You've developed these skills on how to interact with people, on how to manage your time, on how to problem solve, and all of these skills that that we develop as med techs really give you license to almost do anything that you can imagine with it, you know. And so yes, we all have it. Don't feel like you're the only one. As Dr. Kanakis says, it's a really big growing experience, and just be in that moment and learn from it and grow from it and push through.
So one kind of final question. I feel like a lot of people, when they're thinking about moving on to a different space in their career, always think that, oh my God, this is a permanent decision and this is it, and my life will never be the same ever again. But I remember a couple of you talking about how, if need be, if you decided you wanted to work in the lab again, you probably could. Can you expand on that just a little bit to let people know that this is not some sort of irreversible choice that they're making and they're scorched earth their former lives forever?
think it's an easy, answer for everybody here that's involved in this panel. Your experience on the bench and in CLS or MLS school can never be taken away from you, and you always will carry that with you no matter what happens in your career. Whether that thing on the wall right there is kept up to date or not, it's really easy to reinstate it. It's not that hard. If you go too long, you may have to take a test, but that's on you. But it's not like it's harder than riding a bike. And we are all in this career and using the skills and lessons we learned in medical laboratory science, whether directly or indirectly in other facets of our careers. And it's what makes all of our secondary career choices that much better. I think we bring a lot to the table in our different roles, but I think you can never get rid of your experience and your education. So it's always there.
Technology may change over time, but QC is still QC. Cells are still cells. A microscope still works the same way. If you remember how to do your cells, I haven't done hematology since I left school, and that was like 2016. I've been in chemistry this whole time. I still remember what a monocyte looks like. I can do basics. One of my specialists is on this call, so please don't ask me to go to body fluids, but I can do basics, as long as you know the science, it's still there.
Do you think that's true for Samantha, Stephanie, and Vera? Do you think you could go back?
Oh yeah, I could. Yeah, and I keep up with my certification as well. And if I ever wanted to go back, I feel that I could, and probably need to brush up a little bit, but I could do it.
I joke that when I retire, which people are never going to be able to retire anymore, but I'll go and back into the lab. But yeah, I think I could. I think kind of like Sophia said, the technology will change, but the science behind it, and you'll always be trained. Like, it's not like they're going to be like, oh well, you worked here before, you just go ahead and do it. But I think besides from going back and working, I think another thing to point out is, especially for myself, even though I'm not like working in the lab anymore, I'm still really actively involved in ASCLS. And so keeping up with people that work in the field and kind of the policies and different trends that are going on in the field, and just being aware of what's going on and interacting with people that are still working, I think also helps to kind of keep you fresh in a sense. So just surrounding yourself with the lab community, I think also kind of helps to kind of keep that spark there.
So kind of don't be afraid to branch out if that's what calls you. But Vera, did you have one last thing?
No, I was gonna say, like I said earlier, you can always go back, and we all have the skill. It doesn't just go away. When I don't go into our IC lab as often, because we do have a technician who does a lot of the micro lab work for us. But when I do go in there, and I pick up that plate, I pick up that loop, it's almost like that muscle memory just comes back, and reading those plates, reading that Staph aureus, sniffing that Pseudomonas, it all just comes
Not
back.
that we would ever sniff plates ever.
Yes, exactly. Or believe one of those, but it all comes back.
All right, well, that will go ahead and wrap it up. I wanted to kind of end on the note of, don't be afraid. Like, if you think that this is something that you might want to pursue in the future, go for it. And if you need to go back, you can always go back. So I want to thank all of our panelists very, very much. I want to thank the people who came and attended. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.